Welcome to What Have You, featuring Rachel Jankovic and Rebecca Merkel. This audio is brought to you by Canon Press.
Welcome back to What Have You. I'm Rachel Jankovic.
I'm Becca Merkel.
Here we are, just the two of us, no surprise guests.
No.
We're not on any
No.
other podcast.
Very standard this week.
It's just our own, the big question of why. What have you? The acronym we didn't mean to make, but that
I
is so
know.
appropriate.
It took me a while before Rachel's going to open hers,
Yeah.
so I'll just open mine
People
too.
kept texting me, or somebody was texting me, like, I was listening to Why, and I was like, why?
What does it mean? Yeah.
What were you
There's
listening?
Wham, there's Why.
Shit, is- oh, our podcast. Interesting. I hadn't noticed that.
Yeah, I do feel like there's some poetry there.
So I had something that I thought we should talk about.
Okay.
And I feel like it's just, the intersection of all Christian living feels to me like this could spring off of this one
Okay.
topic. But a long time ago, quite a long time ago, I don't know how long, we did an episode that was the PG-13 episode because we were talking about the...
Minnesota?
No, that was a different one, I think. We were talking about the one which was...
The one that we got deleted?
No, I think it went out to the world because
Oh.
someone messaged me about it recently.
Oh.
It was the one about Christian women telling new brides not to feel like they have to have sex on their wedding night.
I thought that was one of the ones that got lost in the universe.
I wonder if it did at first and we redid it.
We might have
and we
circled
redid
back,
it
yeah.
more
Is
cautiously.
this continuing to be a problem? Is that what you're trying to bring up
Well,
right now?
yeah, no, yes, but actually it just was making me think about something because I was having you know how you have some of those times where multiple conversations about totally different things happen at one
converge.
time?
Yes.
And so that episode came up in a conversation with one person, but then there were just these other momentous life issues in other conversations that I was having.
Okay.
And it just struck me how this is it. This is the whole heart of...
I'm really sorry. I'm
I
really
can't even.
sorry.
I can't even
I
describe.
can't cope with it, Rachel. I have to deal with it.
Okay, Becca's doing gross things because she's trying to clean out
I'm just
some kind
fishing
of
it's like
a
soggy.
cache of coins.
No, it's a straw wrapper tucked down in the little change compartment that got soggy. I was fishing it
All
out.
right, so
Pardon that.
that was
Interruption.
gross. That was
That-
gross, and this too might connect to all of Christian reality.
Soggy straw wrappers.
This is the thing that I was thinking of. Is I think in that episode we were just talking about I actually don't remember what we were said in that episode, but I know how I feel about this topic,
okay.
so I can
Sure.
imagine what we said. But the thing that was interesting to me is in this conversation and in these other conversations, there's so much emphasis on protecting your own heart and your own emotions. That's like, I don't feel like doing this, or I don't feel like taking this next. And so in a conversation with a woman that I was having, it struck me how much I was saying we are really wronging young girls as a Christian culture when we act like everything is supposed to accommodate itself to how you feel in order for it to be right and good. And I was thinking about the reality that at some point, and this is not to step in and judge assorted couples in their private decisions of what may have gotten them to that place. It's just in general, a society that acts like a bride has no obligation to be sexually friendly to a groom. Like there's no pressure there, is the same society that makes transitions like becoming a new mother so much upheaval for
Such a
a
drama.
woman. Because instead of the frank dealing with this is your duty, like you have a duty here that you need to do, and that there are just multiple different times in life where your Christian duty will feel like jumping off a high dive, like where it feels like a loss of control.
I'm sorry though. I feel like that has to be an obscure pocket of. It's not like our society at large thinks this.
Yes, they do. Yes, they do. This is why.
No,
because
it's not. No. I mean, I get it in the broader
Because-
picture, but nobody acts like the wedding night is maybe or maybe not going to involve anything remotely sexual. Nobody acts like that except for, I would think, a weird small pocket of strangely oriented
No.
Christian women. No, for real,
Okay.
Rachel. Like, there's...
Okay,
this is
maybe
not-
that's probably true, but I actually think it's not as small as you think it is, because I think it's actually the acceptance of the world's idea of sex, which is whenever you want to do it,
Yes,
it's
of
right.
course, yes.
Which means that whenever you don't want to is wrong, whether or not it's your wedding
But
night.
I'm just saying, even the pagans know what the wedding's about.
Yes, but the Christians, well, I would argue with that, because they're all about getting into bed on the third date. And
I'm not saying they have it sorted out. I'm just saying I can't think of anyone outside weird Bible
I think
studies.
what you mean is only Christians would be so dumb as to come up with
kind of.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I mean, because
But I think it's not a weird prudery. I think it's an acceptance of total debauchery, which is to act like this is something that we only do if we think it would make us
sure.
feel a certain way. It's like in service to our own
No, it's
emotions.
Christians being incredible divas about themselves.
Yes, but I was just
That's
thinking
true.
how brutal, because, I've had other conversations with new mothers where I have realized that the world, including the Christian world, not just the worldly pagan people, have so ill-equipped women
Oh, yeah.
to deal with these moments that are major coming of age transitions that will feel emotionally tumultuous.
But I think it's because we don't admire it anymore, which means that it also makes the whole thing
We
even,
don't admire
even more
motherhood,
extra.
or
Yeah. It's like,
I think we don't admire any kind of self-sacrifice.
no, we don't. We basically don't admire anything that's lovely at all. So
We're the world of people who are foregoing the beautiful big flower bouquets for one of those little dusty silk flowers with fake dewdrops on it from one
From
of
the
those
dollar store?
Yeah, kind of one that gets kind of a greasy dust bunny buildup on it. And we're like, that's it. This
Yeah.
is the one.
yeah,
But-
no, I think it's true. But I'm just saying that there are cultures, I think, still where motherhood is highly prized. Not in America, but I mean, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I feel like there are places still in the world where becoming a mother is something that you wanted so much. Think of the Old Testament, just the difficulty for some of these women,
Yes.
where it was like, this is all they wanted. And then now I think if you want to be a mother, that's a little embarrassing. You're not supposed to say that
You're
out
not
loud.
supposed to be like, if only I could have,
right.
children.
So I do
I'm sure
think
I've said that in here, that our friend from the Congo, who introduced me to the way some parts of the world view twinning and twins, that apparently at their weddings, a toast is, may you be the mother of twins.
Oh, wow.
I mean, it's a thing.
Yeah.
And that I would introduce myself differently for having had twins.
Right.
You achieved...
yeah.
Which is funny in itself.
No, but I
'cause
just
you
mean
didn't. But
because we live in a society that does not prize it, that finds it to be a bit embarrassing and sort of a begrudging, well, okay, I guess if you want to.
if you're the kind of weirdo
then-
that thinks having a child is a valuable task,
right, or more than
Yeah.
one child. So then, of course, you're reckoning with becoming a mother, but without any of the feelings that this is a worthwhile and wonderful thing. I mean, and of course Christians should have that, and I know lots of Christian churches still have that, but I do think that does add to the drama of
Well, it adds to this horrible slurry of things that is it's like you have your emotions that you feel like somehow have to align with what you're being obligated to do, and that we're so badly equipping our daughters to just be faithful through all these major transitions. And it is an interesting thing, though, because I was thinking about, no matter how much you wanted to get, say you really are excited that you're getting married and you're completely in love and everything, you're all the way on board with the whole relationship, you could still be an absolute Twinkie when it comes to your wedding night, deciding I don't feel good about this, I'm gonna lock myself in the bathroom, or I'm gonna not do this. I'm gonna call my best friend and tell her I don't like this idea anymore.
Maybe this is me being weirdly naive, Rachel, but this feels to me like it must be a sparse problem.
No, it's not a sparse problem. It is not a sparse problem, and I'll tell you why. Because now I'm about to make this the most controversial episode we've ever done. It's the great evils of women's ministry. This is why it's not a sparse problem. It is actually, maybe it was originally just a little spark somewhere, but I think it's being fanned by women's ministers.
You're telling me this is a live and talked about issue that is being promoted by people?
Mm-hmm.
Where?
1000%, yes.
Where?
Becca.
Where?
You don't get out much.
I don't. I'll be real. If I see a women's ministry blog post coming, I turn and I run away. I don't go there. I don't read it.
I'm that
not
person.
interested.
I pick that scab.
But you're
actually, I don't really read a lot of this.
This just feels real weird to me. Like,
okay, but just take my word for it. That all over the world, there are women who have some kind of an emotional problem with their marriage relationship.
Oh, yeah.
And they go talk to other women, and other women don't tell them.
Here's the thing.
Other women do not speak in the words of Paul to them.
No,
they
no,
speak
they don't.
in the words of some other, I feel your pain, you should never have to do something you don't want to do in that moment.
Here's the thing. I am, of course, I understand that, yes, there have been plenty of women who've probably been weird about that. I'm just saying, since when has this become a point of activism? That's the part I don't get. Like, is this a platform?
Yeah, okay. Since women's ministry type people started trying to minister to one another's problems that ought to be rebuked.
Oh, well, that's for sure.
Right? Like, when you're having a sin problem. So, like, I think it's probably old news that girls might have this sudden squeamishness or something. You know, like, that might suddenly... That I think that's as old as the hills. What I think is new is the fact that your average Christian woman would not say in counseling that, should have thought of that before you joined the force. Or that would never, ever just quote scripture about it, or say, it's interesting because the Apostle Paul speaks to this very issue.
They would sit and pet their hair.
They would say, we have to grieve with you. We have to gather up all of the other women to talk about how your husband has not done right by you by thinking that you ought to have sex with him, or whatever it is, because this is the thing that happens. Then just fast forward a little bit and ask yourself, how are Christians on the whole dealing with women who get all like, I didn't know how hard it would be to be a mother. I didn't know that it would feel like this. I'm so miserable. I'm so whatever. It's not with bracing words and like, guess what? You have duties.
The thing with that is that, the saying about there's no such thing as bad weather, only bad clothing. It's kind of like... Mm-hmm. I do feel like there are a whole set of things that are going to be hard about becoming a mother, for instance. There are going to be changes. It's going to be a blustery time, but you can either go into it equipped for that, or you can go into it not equipped for it. And I do think that the Christians are making a real point, a real concerted effort to say, when we encounter the blusters, it's important that we only be wearing the sort of thinnest of sweaters.
The least possible.
We aren't going to have a
You know
parka
why?
on
Because we're going to be
or a
authentic.
raincoat.
We're going to be our authentic selves. I actually feel like there's just some life transitions. I wanted to have kids. Like, I had no doubt in my mind that I wanted to have kids. But I got really morning sick. And on that first trip through, feeling really sick while your body is having a takeover time of other things happening, I can remember the feeling that was total loss of control. What I mean is not that I wasn't freaking out. I'm saying it was the feeling that your body was not your own. Yeah. Right? Like, and there's a real element of like, I'm not even the one doing this. Like, God is doing this in me, and this is for someone else, and it's like just, and I think that that's a beautiful thing. And as someone who even wanted that to happen, I had a
Yeah.
moment of
But you
getting
might
the
have
wobbles
to,
about
you
it.
might have to put your hood up. You might
Yeah,
have to
yeah,
zip
and-
that coat.
But I feel like what I mean is marriage is this way, motherhood is this way, your children leaving the nest is this
Or
way,
just
your
you
multiple
going to college is
Yes.
this way.
multiple times in your life, there is a transition that is happening to you more than by you. Like,
Well, okay, and I was thinking,
like-
actually, I was talking to you about this the other day. I do think there's a funniness as well. This is sort of, I guess, related, but I think we seem to think that first you're a baby, and then you're a toddler, and then you're like in elementary school, and then you're in junior high, and then you're in high school, and then you're in college, and then you're an adult. And then you're just an adult forever. And there are so many transition points from after that where I think there's this sort of expectation when you're in those younger stretches. There's expectations that you have learned new skills, that you're going up to the next grade, that you're going to be promoted to this next thing, that you're changing locations, whatever. But then all the changes that happen after that can blindside people because, well, I'm just an adult now. You know, like now I'm just in the one
haven't
phase.
I arrived? Yeah.
And it's just sort of, you know, adultishness after that. But I think people hit
I think that
things in their
may
marriage.
actually be why it's called the midlife crisis, is because
Yeah.
people quit expecting to have to grow and to have to change and be like adapting to things. Okay, so when I was saying there's a bunch of different times, there are different times in your life where it really is like you're just shooting down a tube slide now all of a sudden,
Yeah.
right? I think a lot of Christian counseling is like how to get a really bad, you know, court burn on your way down. how to sit up on the tube so that you basically shave the top of your head off in the tunnel on your way down. Like when you're becoming a mother, how to make this really miserable, or how to fling a leg out so that it'll get jammed. It's an amazing.
Yep.
Suddenly it's coming back to me about getting all the limbs in the wagon. It's because I use that analogy.
Yeah.
Maybe I always feel like I'm screaming down a
No, but
precipice.
it's true that
But-
you can chap all the skin off your elbows
Right.
if you want to.
Well, because in that moment, even though I wanted to be a mother, in that moment where I felt really overwhelmed that my body was like being taken away off to
Sure.
be ill.
Yeah.
Like for a prolonged period, and nothing felt normal, plus you're hormonal, so that'll just give you an extra treat on top of it all. And in that moment you can decide to lean into what's chafing you, right? Like you
Yes.
can decide to be like, okay, or this is why I said I think it comes down to the heart of the Christian life. You die to yourself, like,
Yeah.
or instead of being like, let's really see how bad of a blister I can get on this, instead you think, or you know, follow me closely, maybe I give up my own, maybe I die to myself because of what I believe.
No, but here's the thing, Rachel. If you die to yourself, then you don't have yourself to treasure up. That's what we
love,
don't.
and we love our blisters more than we love our life in
No,
Christ.
the thing is I think he who wants to save his life will lose it. And this is
Yeah,
always
so
the
much
gospel truth. And whoever loses his life for me will save it. And I know that that's talking about the macro picture, but
We'll
in
find
the
it, right?
Christian life, it's always the way to the front of the line is to go to the back.
Yep.
It's always the way up is down.
And to die to yourself is joy.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
It's like it actually isn't. And then I guess I'll just be miserable. It's
Well,
like,
no. And actually the reality is that to die to yourself is the way to bypass the blisters and the jammed legs and the,
Yeah.
I mean, it is the way to receive as a great gift from God something that you could have made into a great pain.
Well, and it's noticeable how much the Bible talks about putting others first and how much
Almost
we
as if it would be something we needed to think about.
consider others as more important than yourself. And it's that is something we don't like at all these days.
No. And when I was saying this about women always trying to come alongside to make everyone feel better about themselves, but that's because we think it sounds mean. to say, you know what you've got to do? You got to die to yourself and live to Christ. Like, this is the moment where what you're actually being is monumentally self-centered. Like, and nobody wants to be the friend that says that, because everybody likes the idea of being the friend who rubs the back and comforts and gives a hug and makes everyone feel better. And empathizes. That's it. Like, we think that that's how we really strengthen our friends.
It's not to say that you have to be rude, but you do have to speak the truth.
Well, this is a thing that I say a lot, but I'll say it again anyways, that I'm done with people acting like talking about Jesus when someone is having a crisis is being too flippant. And they say, we have to weep with those who weep.
It's true.
And here's my feeling. Have you ever known a Christian who could go to talk to someone who's in the middle of a grievous trial of some sort, who could talk about Jesus without weeping with those who weep?
Right.
Like, it's not like we're supposed to weep separate from our faith with each other, and then only when the sun comes out again do we mention Jesus. And I think that, to me, that is one of the grossest warpings of what it means to be a Christian, to be like, well, we're just supposed to sympathize with how hard it is to be a new mother of a child, and we should just cry with her.
No, it's like, don't cry with her. Take her dinner and give her a little,
say, you know what, sport?
I would love to help buck you up. What can I do?
Yeah.
Do something practical. That's great. But sitting around commiserating with...
But even the doing something practical, I think that's wonderful. I'm in no way opposed to helping people out practically. But I think that we've really done a little magic trick on ourselves of thinking that we can fix things without the woman herself receiving it from God. Do you know what I mean? Like that you can come alongside, and if only she could get more babysitting help, if only she could get more time out, if only she could, it's like all of those things are going to be totally useless if she's not willing to lay it all down.
Oh yeah. I just mean that we do like the idea more of sitting around being unhelpful. And oftentimes, it's, if the person has stalled out and is refusing to get out of bed for weeks at a stretch, let's say that's where they are. You patting their head is of no practical use, really. And that's what I mean, like, help out, help get them out. Get out the tow rope. It's time to help with this, because we can't leave you here in the ditch. And most people want to sit down in the ditch with them.
And actually feel like they're doing something really deep if they do that. If they will come alongside in that way. But so here's what I was thinking. So say, like in my phase of life, and your phase, and I think you're just a little further on than I am. I feel like, so I've had opportunities to die to myself, and then you get to a life where you feel pretty comfortable. Like you're like, oh, this is what I do, this is how it goes. Well, then all of a sudden, sooner than you think, your children are graduating from that phase where you're needed in that way. And it's a whole new opportunity to die to yourself within and this is a theme I've talked about before, but like, there will be times in your life where you're doing something that honors God. And that it honors God. Like, God gave me this ability so that I would use it this way, and I'm doing this, and I know it honors God. But then there comes a time where to insist on still doing that would be dishonoring God.
For sure.
And so the exact same activity that was glorifying Him in one phase of your life is not in another.
Yeah.
And that is really hard for people to get their head around. So when your little kids are little and you're like glorifying God by reading them a story in the afternoon and making them tea sandwiches or something, and it's great, would not be glorifying God fast forward years where you're oppressing your children by trying to force them into having a tea sandwich in the afternoon while you read them something. Like, the exact same activity changes with time to be not the same activity anymore. Yeah. And that's what I think is interesting. Is like, how can you in one phase be doing something that's great. And this is how I think people lock down, and this is how I be faithful. And start making it a summary of how you pack lunches and how you do laundry and how you, like, my faithfulness is, and then a specific list of things instead of a constant response to the life that God has given us.
Well, which is what we've talked about before, the difference between parenting and logistics, because the logistics are necessary, but they serve a bigger purpose. And when you forget the bigger purpose and get bogged down simply in logistics, then you've really gone off the road, because those logistics have to always change in service to the bigger thing. So I think people can do this when they continue to, say, correct their children the same way when they're 17 and 18 and 19 and 20 as they did when they were 3, 4, and 5. Like, you continue to be a critical parent.
Or you're like weirdly patronizing to a teenager when you should be showing
or
him. Or
you're sharing their sin problems with your friends. When you're sharing the sin problems of your 3-year-old with your friends, that's very different than sharing your 18-year-old's sin problems with your friends. And so the same activity is very different depending on the context. But we can get so stuck in our little logistics framework that we don't remember what it was there for in the first place.
Yeah, we totally can. And I think it's just a really bizarre, I've told this story too, where I went to check in at the hospital sometime with Moses, I think, when I was going to have him, and the nurse doing some new paperwork. It was the only time I had heard this. It was like, you have a right to a completely pain-free birth experience. And I just sat there looking at her like, I was like, pretty sure I don't have that right.
Do I have that?
Yeah, I actually don't. I'd be willing to say that's not one of my rights as a person. And it's kind of like, you have a right to have a fingernail that never breaks. It's like, do I? I don't know that I do have that. But I think we live in a world that wants us to believe that you can avoid all kinds of, you can avoid the difficulties of responsibility.
I think what I mean is, it's like we say we have a right to sunshine every day and 73 degrees. And it's like, no, we don't. Those are beautiful.
Hair.
Those are beautiful days, but when it's not that out, you've got to adapt yourself to the situation rather than expecting the situation to adapt itself to what you're wearing.
Your expectations.
You're going to have to be ready to encounter it. And so you have to prepare, and you have to be sensible, and you have to know what you're getting into, and pivot quickly when you realize it's not what you thought you were getting into. And
we just did in the Bible reading challenge to this morning was Esther.
Yes.
Which is just really edifying in all the ways. So
Quite
good.
something, isn't it?
So good. Yeah. But you just think about, what did Esther have a right to? Like, God exalted her much. You know what I mean? Like she as a woman worthy of great honor, but her actual rights were incredibly imposed upon. And even when Mordecai is telling her to, where he's like, basically, you're gonna die, like, don't think you'd be spared. When he's like, don't think you'd be spared. God can spare us some other way, but kind of like, but if you don't do this, you won't be spared. And she's like, think of asking that many people to fast and pray because you're going to go do a very scary thing. A tremendously scary thing with huge risks. No matter, like, if you fail, it's huge risks. Like, everyone you know and love will be killed. And if you fail another way, it's for sure you're going to be beheaded. And if you fail, really, that was not a situation that we would think would be like Esther's best thriving opportunity. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, we really feel like she should. How can she bloom more freely? How could Esther have bloomed more freely? Like, but she was a woman who faithfully carried a huge responsibility and a huge obligation. And I think I just say that because I was thinking about that. We don't admire that anymore. But if we did culturally admire that, we would see our small opportunities to carry a responsibility bravely.
I also think the agenda to get us to not admire that is in large part responsible for where we are as a culture now. And so it's like, if we want to combat the very obvious wickedness of our moment, we have to recapture the idea that it requires everybody doing their duty in sync. Like, how does an army win? It's everybody standing in the place where they're supposed to stand, not running away, and doing the job that they are assigned to do. And it's when you have that happening that you can actually overcome. But as long as everybody is wandering off from their assigned space because they didn't like it very much and it was kind of hard and it's sort of difficult, well, yeah, you're going to get conquered immediately. And so I think that we have to really recover the sense that when you're being obedient at home in your life, doing the things God has assigned to you, that is you staying in your assigned place, and you are doing what you're supposed to do. And
the nobility of obedience.
Yes. And just think, like, I don't know how God's going to use this, but I do know what he's asked of me. And so I'm going to stand right here. And I think
I'm doing my duty.
I'm going to
do it gladly and willingly.
Yeah. And
not
your duty might be to be an actual warm and affectionate wife to your husband. It might be to be willing to have children.
Be to feel like you're falling off a cliff when you just had your first baby, and to still trust the Lord with that. Like, to trust the Lord that he knows what he's doing here.
Right. And don't you be a, monster diva about the difficulties. And I do think we just need to get a little bit more, emotional strength as a people group, because I think that is a huge part of the fuel to the big dumpster fire, is lack of emotional control anywhere in our country. There's a lot of lack of emotional control going on.
That's the truth. I think it's just it is a good thing to think about. Where are the trigger points in your own life where you are being emotionally too available, kind of? There was some illustration my husband used to use with our kids. It was talking about their emotions being like a stack of blocks somewhere, and he was like, you must keep it, like, you cannot be building this out all the time in places where if someone just walks by, it falls over. Like, your job is to fortify the situation and not to, or he would say, he would compare it to riding a wobbly bike, because that was when our first had just learned to ride a bike, and it felt very wobbly on the bike. And he was saying, it can feel wobbly, but it is your point just being, don't put your emotions all stacked out in a weird teetering thing at the front door, so that when your husband comes in and doesn't make eye contact with you right away, there they all go, and you've blown the evening with an emotional drama.
Or if you have, just take care of it
quickly,
pull it back together, confess it.
But I would say also just look around you with what are the things that you're being this way about. One of those things is, I had a real transition in my own life whenever it was years ago, where I realized I was never going to be done with the laundry, which was really strangely an important thing that I needed to notice. And I really wonder why it took me so long to notice it. I think I just kept questing. And the laundry should be obvious because you're always wearing a clothes.
Yeah.
So there's never, you're always brewing up the next batch of laundry no matter what you do. But the moment where I realized, actually, this is more about me faithfully always doing it
Yeah.
than it is about trying to get it done. And I think that there are some places where we need to just have that reality check with ourselves. Like, are you a mother who genuinely, like, sighs to yourself whenever your baby has a dirty diaper?
Yeah.
Like, where it's like, poor me, this happened again. Instead of
Yeah.
like, well, obviously it did. You know, like, this is, or things that are recurring. Do you know what I mean? Like, these are recurring obstacles. Are you letting that be something that you take personally?
Or are there things that you avoid because they're hard, but you actually know that they're your duty? You know, like, I don't cook for my family because I don't really
I don't like it.
like it. Or I don't actually try to keep anything clean or nice or attractive at home because I don't enjoy it.
It's not the kind of person I
doesn't
am.
bring me joy. Or I am not actually
word.
willing to homeschool my kids because that would be hard.
I remember a woman saying one time, and it was very funny in the context because it was actually the woman who said it was like a advice columnist.
Okay.
So that just made it funnier to me. Memorable. Just spelling it out for people. Like, listen, I'm not the kind of person who cares if my socks are matched or not. And I don't care. But my husband does. So I just explained to him that I don't care. So he's going to have to match his own socks if he thinks it would be nice.
Wow.
The line that
Wow.
I've drawn in the sand is that if I don't enjoy matching a sock, it's not happening.
I know. But I'm just thinking, like, on the educating your kids. It's sort of like, well, my kids are all in public school, but if I had to try to give them a Christian education, it would either be really expensive or it would take a lot of my time, and
I can't have that happen.
it's not a cost I'm willing to consider. You know,
Yeah.
like, it's
Yeah.
sort of, there are a lot of duties out there
Mm-hmm.
that I think that we understand.
I was just talking
in
to my
some
kids
way.
about this, about the tragedy of, like, this. It is like kind of a noble tragedy, but how many people came to America when they were being persecuted or really in major times of crisis, but who were leaving major family history
Yeah.
and, like, beautiful homes or land that they loved or places where they had roots. It wasn't like they were all poverty stricken.
yeah.
They left, you know, how many people fled, you know, during World War II, got out, how many people got out before all of their beautiful inheritance was ransacked by somebody, you know. But my point was, that's a really hard decision for people to actually cut it. Like, it's a tragic nobility to be like, we're leaving this to go, but that's a real cost. You can think of it just as being like, oh, it's a mess on that end, so we're gonna you know, like, oh, things are really rough there, so we're gonna go where it's better. But how many people had to go where they would be going to so much less than what they had, and yet they had to make that decision and do it anyways.
Yeah.
I don't know why I just brought that up. I think it's nobility. It would just mean the idea that we don't have big imaginations about what we're doing being worth what we're doing. You know, like, we just end up being thwarted and oppressed all the time by things that should have been foreseeable.
It's true.
Yeah,
This
well.
is true.
So my point here is really, if you're on one of the high-speed slip and slide times, just embrace it and die to yourself.
Okay, so I have something here, which is sort of connected to that. But Ben and I just got back to town last night late, and I always just try and find something to read, you know, on the plane, something fun while I'm on my trip. And wow, I was not ready for the shock and awe of what I got. So I get this book about gardens, and I promise you this is going somewhere that's connected.
Okay. I'm prepared.
It's the story of this garden that is like one of the most famous in England, and it's sort of multi-generational. So the woman who made it famous in the early part of the 20th century was Vita Sackville West, and this is a book written by her grandson's wife, who lives in this same castle and is a gardener and stuff. So it's like this sort of layered story of this garden, and it looked like it was on gardening, like it was the you know, how she put it together. And I you know, like, her previewed it, and it had a ton of like actual varieties and things. You know, it was like, ooh, that's fun. So I get that, and I'm reading it on my phone. Oh my gosh, Rachel, this woman, Vita Sackville West, who made this garden, and I knew her name, so it was kind of like, oh yeah, I should, that'll be fun. Oh my heavens. I mean, she's married to this guy, and she was like very aristocratic, so, you know, pictures of her as a child when the king came to tea, you know, out on the lawn, here I am with the king, that sort of a thing. She marries this guy. They have 2 children. She proceeds to have multiple lesbian affairs, one with Virginia Woolf, etc. So I think A Room of One's Own is actually in some way regarding Vita Sackville West. Her husband, mean the while, having multiple homosexual affairs.
Perfect.
So this is what's going forth here. And you're like, what have I signed up for now? Like, this was not what I thought I was going to find in the gardening book. But it was just kind of a by the way. It was just sort of like setting the stage for what kind of a woman she was and everything. And it's told kind of from the perspective of like,
live and let live.
Well, yeah, you know, this is who they were and how they handled things. And at one point, she and one of her lesbian lovers like jet away to France. This ties into your earlier point. They had made a vow that neither of them would sleep with their husbands. And then one of them thought perhaps the other one was not keeping her end of the deal or something. Anyway, they zip forth to France. Their husbands chase them in a 2-seater airplane. Like, what? What? I'm like, oh, this is insanity. But anyhow, so this is all happening around like World War I, this depravity central.
Okay.
But here's what I'm trying to say. Her worldview came out in that garden absolutely consistently. And the woman writing it is fully able to connect those dots. It's kind of like she was in full rebellion against the structure of the Edwardian life. So it was like the Edwardian gardens had been very proper and very clipped and very structured, and she was throwing off all of this. And so her garden was this kind of like packed with tons of unpruned roses and things, you know, like it was this very over the top kind of, and it looks lovely. It looks like there are some beautiful things about that garden. But what I'm saying is, both she and the woman who was putting together this kind of memoir of this garden are able to connect the dots between what you believe about the world in your and sort
how
of
you work that
fundamental
out in
commitments, and then how does it come out even in your garden. And it was making me realize that the secularists have no problem doing this, and I wish we could get the Christians to have as much of a commitment to like, I am a Christian wife, what do I believe about the world, and how can I show that in everything,
and how
even
can I
in my garden, even
how
in
can
my,
I connect the dots of what I believe to what I put my hands to and how I invest in this.
Exactly. And so this is to poach this thought from my husband, who was presenting something the other day, and I was really struck by this. He was pointing out that the secularists are post-millennial and Paedo-Baptist. Like, they absolutely are. Because he was quoting, Obama had the quote from Martin Luther King where he says, the arc of history is long, but it bends towards justice. But the plot points that he is charting on there are Seneca Falls to and down to Stonewall and the gay riots there and so forth. So it's like the arc of history is long, but it bends towards justice. Like, we are going to win, and we are going to get our thing done, and we're going to conquer this world, and we're going to push our agenda. They have this post-millennial take, and they have absolutely no problem grabbing the children from the time they are tiny and catechizing them like, this is who you are, these are your people, and you are coming with us. And it is like, and they can connect the dots between their worldview and everything they put their hands to, even if it is something as innocuous.
Even if it's like, I am going to have jeans that already have holes in
Right.
them.
Right.
It's because
Vivienne,
the fabric of society is being broken.
Vivienne Westwood said. She tore the clothes apart. She's the one who invented pre-ripped clothing. She said she tore the clothes to show that she wanted to tear apart society. She was totally aware of what her agenda was and what she was doing. And so I just wish we could get Christians to be as self-conscious about how can I connect what I believe about the world to everything that I do, down to the details. And,
Well, I just want to say, harking back to all of this, one of the things that is often the problem and the hitch for women is that they feel like they're being somehow confined by marriage, confined by motherhood, or confined. And what you just said is a great way of saying, like, that let that be your goal, to know God, to honor God, to glorify God, and to do it in the little domain that He has put you in, to try to do your best to reflect what you know of Him in how you set your table, and in how you feed your children, and in how you don't freak out about little details, because you know the kind of God you serve.
Right. So is your house going to be joyful, or is it going to be uptight?
And if your kids wrote a retrospective on what our childhood felt like and what that meant about God,
right,
what would it be? What would their takeaway be?
It was always shrill and dark.
What if it was like,
nobody could step out of
Mom
line?
hated it when we turned the lights on.
Yeah.
And the biggest concern at dinner is that we didn't spill anything,
right,
or make noise. And they'd be like, that was because we believe God is... I mean, like, think about it in terms of someone actually telling their story and what it meant about your faith. Because you're a character in a story. And you think about... Who knows? I mean, there's a little bit of trepidation goes into imagining your kids trying to explain, here's what our life was like.
Oh, man, I know. But you just want it to be like, what kind of God do you serve? And then how can you show that in your home? Like, it should be joyful and exuberant and overflowing and grateful and cheerful. And not a lot of sitting around with a sulky face nursing your wounds.
Or feeling just sorry for yourself 24/7. Instead of, like, that's a really hard thing for kids to grow up in.
It is hard.
That is a ugly, hard story of the world. And so it's like just that idea of trying to see your home and your life from someone else's perspective. Or how about from your husband's perspective? When he leaves and goes out and works all day, when he comes home, what is it that he comes home to?
Right.
Is it Mom's barrage of complaints about the day?
Yeah.
And at last...
Hopefully it's going to be the sort of place that more often than not is like, oh, I'm so glad I'm back.
Exactly.
Instead of, oh, here we go. And like, how soon can I sneak away to get together with the guys?
How long can I sit in the car in the driveway before I have to go in there? And when I do go in there, even I will say this as a person who has through many years been the one on guard in a very raucous and noisy home. Coming home for Luke has never been the experience of coming in and
to a quiet,
putting your feet up in your slippers with the newspaper. That we have missed the mark if that was our goal. But he would tell me, your job, like when I come home, I want children who have been well disciplined and are happy. Like that. And so it might have been loud and raucous, but it was happy. Right, like that. Well, I'm not saying every time it was happy, but that's what our goal was. Like the goal is that the house might be rowdy, but it will be happy. And actually...
but you also have to take your own husband into account, not Rachel's husband, So the thing is...
this is true.
Because you don't want to be adapting all of your lifestyle to someone who doesn't actually live there. You know, like you want it
course
to
not,
actually
but
be
I don't
fun
think-
for your husband to come home, and you
Right.
know your husband.
Yes. And it's also, though, yes.
Because you don't want it to be that he cares about matching socks, so you just explain to him that you don't.
Right, but I meant that I think it was more a factor of the fact that we had 7 children and
Exactly.
a dog. That
Yeah,
was not
exactly.
that I was saying, kids, dad's gonna be home soon. Be as loud as possible.
No, but I'm just saying that like what makes a pleasant home for one man is not the same
yeah.
as a different man.
Totally.
And it's very important that you pick the right one when you're
Choose your own husband.
choose your own husband as you think about that.
All right, I think we've gone overboard, haven't we?
Do
you have a tip?
Do I?
Yeah, I have a tip. Okay, last week we talked about books, and we got a bunch of questions and comments about what about picture books? Like, what about the younger? Because we talked mostly older books on that podcast.
Okay.
So I thought we should give tips on the
little board
younger.
books?
Well, let's just do that. Oh yeah, starting with board books. Sandra
Hello,
Boynton.
Ninja. Sandra Boynton. Those are excellent.
Sandra Boynton writes board books that are a joy to read and connect with children. They're Barnyard Dance.
Barnyard Dance is a
Stomp
great
your
one.
feet, clap your hands. Everybody ready for a barnyard dance. Bow to the horse, bow to the cow. Twirl with the pig
Chickens.
if you know how.
Chickens.
Cluck with the chicken, spin with the something about something.
Quack like with the duck.
Duck, spin with your
Now, cluck, cluck, cluck.
I'll take something about in a patch of clover, and I'll take a bow, and the dance is over.
Yeah, no.
With an oink and a moo and a cock-a-doodle-doo. Yeah, so we've done that. We've read Sandra Boynton.
Of course, Dr. Seuss. You can't not
Dr.
do that.
Seuss, yes. And then, but I would
Can
say...
I take a moment to say how much I hate Go Dog Go?
Yeah, I don't like that either. Also, I don't like Are You My Mother? I just get tired of it.
So, anyway.
Also, Mike Mulligan's Steam Engine. It's a burden. But we... all of
Interesting.
I don't. We have that one. I just... Whatever. Here's... Beatrix
Some
Potter
are
is, of
fun
course,
to
fun.
reread, some
But one we love, Tiki Tiki Tembo, is a fun
That's
kids
awesome.
book.
Ricky Tikki
Ricky
Tavi.
Tikki Tavi, which is a Kipling book. We love that one.
But there's
St.
a
George
great-
and the Dragon is a great one.
There's a really good illustrated one of those.
Yes, I would say we like Seven Silly Eaters is a fun one. Also,
There's one called The Summer Folk that we have Ben's old copy from when he was a kid.
Oh, that's fun.
I like that one.
Seven Silly Eaters. What's that? What? Oh, Bear Snores On is a really fun one. And another one that I super love is Honey Bear by Dixie Mist. It's an old one, and I love that one.
That was the Tom Wolfe recommend.
Yep, and so we love that one. So basically, those are some earlier board book type ones. Oh, Brambly Hedge is really fun if you have little girls.
Loved
That
Brambly
one's
Hedge.
primarily beautiful
of the
illustrations.
pictures,
It's
yeah.
not, the stories are,
No,
I don't think
neither
much
here nor
happens
there,
in the
no.
story, but the pictures are a wonderful story of
Yeah.
their own. So
You
Brambly
said
Hedge is
Beatrix
good.
Potter, right?
Yeah, Beatrix
Okay.
Potter is great. I'm trying to think of the ones that we're always pleased to pull out of somewhere. There's a lot of staples like the Harry the Dirty Dog or whatever. There's a lot of those older ones that are just classic kids books. I think the Library Lion was a fun one.
Okay.
Yeah, well, that's a good amount. Do we have any other ones?
You
that
know,
are really...
I'm further away from this phase than you are, so
The original Fancy Nancy to me was a fun book, but after that I couldn't tolerate to hear of Fancy Nancy. The original one was like, I felt like would have been better as a one-off book rather than a lifestyle. Let's think. Yeah, but that's quite a few.
There's quite a few.
I'm racking my brains here trying to think if there's any other words. I mean, we have all the classics of like Little Bear and Frog and Toad and those Winnie the Poohs.
The bread and jam for Francis kinds of ones.
Yeah, we had those. Francis, I discarded the Berenstein Bears from our life.
Yeah, we
They're
didn't
kind of
really
a
do
dark
those.
time with the Berenstein Bears. But yes, anyways, those are some recommends for younger than what we talked about last time.
Yeah.
Readers. But especially Sandra Boynton really do bother with those board books because everybody thinks they're fun.
Mm-hmm.
And
They are
it's
fun.
it's fun to read a board book to a kid who's getting the giggles really hard. Like
Yeah.
Sandra Boynton is that. I don't
She
know
taps
how.
into it.
I had a moment where I was like, you know what? I think this is a really smart woman who wrote this. Red hat, blue hat, green hat. Oops. You know? Yellow pants, red pants, whatever. Oops. Like this, it's a really not elite
No.
literature, but the way that it just sings to children. And I looked her up and she is like a Yale graduate. I mean, she is actually,
really?
I was like, I think this woman bent her smarts to pleasing children. and I just
like it.
I admire her for that.
Yeah, that's good stuff.
All right. Until next
Well,
time.
There you go.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.